Good morning all. Okay, so what is the last topic? Brook 1, Brook 2 also. MB3 also we wrote. Okay, then let's start with public choice theory. So let's write down, we'll just have an idea about what kind of questions have been asked. Public choice theory. Question 2015. PCT promotes steering rather than rowing. A very broad general question. PCT promotes steering rather than rowing. PCT promotes steering rather than rowing. Then 2012, PCT is concerned with Pareto optimality. 2012 question, PCT is concerned with Pareto optimality. Then 2011, Anthony Downs and William Niskanen's view on PCT. Anthony Downs and William Niskanen's views on PCT. Then a very old question, but this is in fact the core question even today. Today's public administration is in the crossroads of PCT, pluralism, corporatism, and elitism. Today's public administration is in the crossroads of PCT, pluralism, corporatism, elitism. Fine. So these are all broadly, because there is something called as okay. These are about PCT. Now before PCT, that means to get to PCT, what we should first write. First, let's write about the broader aspect. That is your, put the heading. A PCT is a form of it. New Right Philosophy, NRP, New Right Philosophy. Fine. So what is the context of it? Just keep, you can easily understand that. In 1980s, the inefficiency of the big state was revealed. 1980s, inefficiency of big state was revealed. Inefficiency of big state was revealed. It was criticized as nanny state. It was criticized as nanny state. James O'Connor criticized it as, so just put an arrow mark. James O'Connor, what is the term used? Fiscal crisis of big state or fiscal crisis of the state. James O'Connor, fiscal crisis of the big state. Fiscal crisis of the big state. Then Jürgen Habermas. crisis of legitimacy of state. Jürgen Habermas, crisis of legitimacy of state. Crisis of legitimacy of state. We'll come to NPM later. David Osborne, Ted Kabler, Rosep. Crisis of legitimacy of state. Nanny said all these criticisms were there. Even if you want to link it to India, even in India, in 1980s or by 1980s, you can all actually keep on linking to Indian context also. Even in India by 1980s, the inefficiency of Nehruvian socialism model, inefficiency of the Nehruvian socialism model was revealed. Inefficiency of Nehruvian socialism model was revealed. Inefficiency of the Nehruvian socialism model was revealed. PSUs, which were called as the temples of modern India, PSUs, which were called temples of modern India by Nehru. PSUs, which were called as temples of modern India by Nehru, failed largely. That means inefficiency. They were suffering from lot of problems. Any words you can use. Failed largely. Fine. Hence, what was the demand? Hence there was a demand for better government rather than big government. Hence, there was a demand for better government rather than big government. So, we don't want big government, we need better government. There is a demand for better government rather than big government. Better government rather than big government. That's what you call it as what? NRP, New Right Philosophy. It is a combination of, NRP is a combination of conservative and liberal ideas. Why is it conservative? Because state wants to be strong. Why is it liberal? Because it should be small. NRP is a combination of conservative and liberal elements. Because it demands reduction in the role of the state, that is liberal. It demands reduction in role of the state. That's what he called it as liberal element. Reduction in the role of the state, in bracket liberal. Then why is it conservative? Plus, that is, and it wants states to be very strong. It wants state to be very strong. It wants state to be very strong to regulate the market. It wants the state to be very strong to regulate the market. To be very strong to regulate the market. Fine. What is it famously called as? Andrew Gabler famously called it as small but strong state. Andrew Gabler famously called it as small but strong state. So it will be a small state, but it has to be very strong state. Famously called it as a small but strong state. Fine. And then below that, PCT, public choice approach or public choice theory. Public choice theory is one of the schools, approaches, whatever you call it as, schools of thought. Public choice theory is one of the schools of NRP. Public choice theory is one of the schools of New Right philosophy. Fine. What is it in simple terms in? PCT means application of, whenever you get PCT, you just write this. PCT means application of the economic principles and concepts. PCT means application of economic principles and concepts. Application of the economic principles and concepts to the political to the political processes, to the political decision making, to the political processes and decision making, to the political processes and decision making. Fine. Now, what is the core of it? Below that, it is based on, that means PCT is based on, it is based on certain core concepts, based on certain core concepts. What is the first one? They call it as methodological individualism. Methodological individualism. Methodological individualism. What does that mean? In simple, it means an individual should be the unit of decision. That means don't try to generalize, take it as every human being separate as a decision maker. It means individual should be the unit of decision making. Individual should be the unit of decision making. Generalizations cannot be applied. Generalizations cannot be applied. Individual should be the unit of decision making. Generalizations cannot be applied. Then 2 is what they call it as utility maximizers or maximization. Utility maximizers. So what does that mean? According to PCT, every individual is rational and selfish. According to PCT, public choice theory, every individual is rational and selfish. Every individual is rational and selfish. Hence what they try to do? Hence they try to maximize their benefits. Hence they try to maximize their benefits. So what did PCT reject? PCT rejected the Weberian assumption. PCT rejected the Weberian assumption that public servants work for the larger public interest or civil servants work for the larger public interest. It rejected the Weberian assumption that the civil servants work for, administrators work for the larger public interest. That they work for the larger public interest. What did it criticize? It criticized politicians as budget maximizers. This is a famous William Niskanen statement also. It criticized politicians as budget maximizers, politicians as vote maximizers and bureaucrats as budget maximizers. Criticized politicians as vote maximizers and bureaucrats as budget maximizers. And the bureaucrats as budget maximizers. Fine. If you want here itself, that statement, William Niskanen in bracket. That statement was given by William Niskanen. William Niskanen. Politicians vote maximizers, bureaucrats budget maximizers. Fine. So that is the core of the idea. Then obviously it was again later developed by multiple people, institutional pluralism, like that multiple things are there. You can write that core one, core idea. Below that, third one, institutional pluralism. Institutional pluralism. Institutional pluralism. Institutional pluralism. What does that mean? Again the same. According to PCT, state and bureaucracy is inefficient. According to PCT, state and bureaucracy is inefficient because it functions in monopoly. lacks competition. It functions in monopoly, lacks competition. Lacks competition. When obviously what has happened? Weberian emphasis on structure and hierarchy. Weberian emphasis on structure and hierarchy has led to red tapeism. Has led to red tapeism. Hence what we need? Hence PCT demands. Hence PCT demands presence of multiple institutions. PCT demands presence of multiple institutions. Greater role for private sector. Greater role for private sector in delivery of goods and services. In the delivery of goods and services. Fine. So now this is the core: methodological individualism, utility maximizers, and institutional pluralism. Then who all expanded it? Famous theorists, you can say PCT thinkers. PCT thinkers. Because that itself, they may ask like a question as they have asked William Niskanen like that. First one, obviously the very famous proponent, Vincent Ostrom. Vincent Ostrom. What is his famous book? Below that, his famous work. His famous work is Intellectual Crisis in American Public Administration. His famous work is An Intellectual Crisis in American Public Administration. An intellectual crisis in the American public administration. Fine. What did he use the term? He criticized that Weberian bureaucracy suffers from. He criticized that Weberian bureaucracy suffers from administrative egoism. Weberian bureaucracy suffers from administrative egoism and administrative elitism. So those are all the keywords. That the Weberian bureaucracy suffers from administrative egoism. Keyword: administrative elitism. Administrative egoism and administrative elitism. What does that mean? It means bureaucracy favors their self-interest rather than public interest. It means bureaucracy favors self-interest rather than public interest. Hence what he demanded? Hence he demanded democratic administration. Hence he demanded democratic administration rather than bureaucratic administration. He demanded democratic administration rather than, all keywords, democratic administration rather than bureaucratic administration. Again the same, he also favored 3 Ds. When you say 3D, devolution, decentralization, democratic administration. He also favored 3 Ds. He also favored 3 Ds. Obviously, what are those 3 Ds? Whenever you get 3 E's like that, 3 economy, efficiency, all those things, effectiveness, like that, 3 Ds means debureaucratization, devolution, democratic decentralization. Debureaucratization, devolution, democratic decentralization. Fine. So that is Vincent Ostrom. Then Jordan Tullock, Gordon, Tullock, Tullock. Jordan Tullock. Fine. Again, his famous book is The Calculus of Consent. His famous book is Calculus of Consent. It will only, if you understand the core ideas, obviously you can expand. According to him, state is inefficient because it does not recognize the nature of human beings. It does not recognize the nature of individuals. Does not recognize the nature of individuals. Fine. Under that first one, selfish nature of human beings. Selfish nature of human beings. As market recognizes the selfish nature, the selfishness of individuals. As market recognizes the selfishness of individuals, what it does? It provides incentives. It provides incentives for the individuals. It provides incentives for the individuals if they contribute to the organization, if they contribute better to the organization. Provides incentives to the individuals if they contribute better to the organization. That means you improve the organizational productivity, organizational goal you achieve, we will give you incentives. If they contribute better to the organizational efficiency, productivity, anything you call it as. If they contribute better to organizational efficiency. Obviously, who doesn't recognize? In state, or in other words in bureaucracy, it is not recognized. In public administration, it is not recognized. In public administration, it is not recognized. But then, absence of competition for the state. That means you don't face enough competition, so it doesn't push you to function better. Absence of competition for the state. Absence of competition for the state. Obviously, what it does, it reduces the triple E, 3 E's. It reduces 3 E's of the state. It reduces 3 E's of the state. Fine. Then the third one, absence of tools. Absence of tools for performance evaluation in state. Absence of tools, parameters to evaluate performance in the state. Absence of tools and parameters to evaluate the performance in the state. What does that mean in simple terms? In private sector, profit is the parameter. In private sector, profit is the parameter. In private sector, profit is the parameter. Hence, it is easy to evaluate the performance of employees. In the private sector, profit is the parameter. Hence, it is easy to evaluate employees' performance. Easy to evaluate the employees' performance. But obviously, what is the core? However, state functions based on service, public interest. However, state functions based on service, public interest. State functions based on service and public interest. Hence, what is missing? Hence, it is qualitative. Hence, it is qualitative rather than quantitative. Hence, it is qualitative rather than quantitative. Obviously, because it is qualitative, what is the loophole? Hence, performance evaluation is difficult. Hence, performance evaluation is difficult. Hence the performance evaluation is difficult. So that is the core ideas of Jordan Telek. Then Anthony Downs. His famous work, Inside Bureaucracy. Inside Bureaucracy. Again what he says, according to him, as the market recognizes the rational, selfish nature of individuals, as the market recognizes rational, selfish nature of individuals, there are tools and techniques. As it recognizes the rational, selfish nature of individuals, there are tools to monitor, tools and techniques to monitor the performance of individuals. There are tools to monitor the performance of individuals. Tools to monitor the performance of individuals. Monitor the performance of individuals. Again what he says, this is missing in the state. This is missing in the state. Again he also criticizes it. Even these tools of monitoring also has limitations. What does he call that? First one, law of diminishing control. Law of diminishing control. What does that mean? It means as the organizations grow big, span of control increases. As organizations grow big, span of control increases. Hence, superiors cannot monitor subordinates easily. Span of control increases, hence, superiors cannot monitor subordinates easily. No, because organizations, when it grows big, one individual has to monitor multiple individuals. So it keeps on increasing. If you create more managers, then that's a different issue. When span of control will increase, hence it affects superiors' ability to monitor subordinates. Then similarly below that, law of diminishing coordination. Law of diminishing coordination. That means especially this is the problem in public sector, these two. So what does that mean? In large organizations, multiple departments will be created, subunits, what they call it as. Remember displacement of goals like that. In large organizations, multiple departments will be created. In large organizations, multiple departments will be created. It leads to subunit goals. Remember, as Robert Merton also says this, it leads to goals of the subunits. Hence overall coordination becomes difficult. If you want in bracket, you can call it as Philip Selznick, S-E-L-Z-N-I-C-K. Philip Selznick has called it as displacement of goals. Robert Merton also uses the word, but he uses it for over obedience to the rules. Philip Selznick calls it as displacement of goals. The law of diminishing control, the law of diminishing coordination. And what does Anthony Downs say? According to Downs, big state suffers from both the problems. Because big state in the sense huge, very big. According to Anthony Downs, big state suffers from both the problems. Big state suffers from both the problems. Big state suffers from both the problems. That is Anthony Downs. Fine. Then William Niskanen. William Niskanen. His famous work, Bureaucracy and Representative Government. Bureaucracy and Representative Government. Obviously, he is the one who used the term. He criticized, we have already written it, he criticized politicians as vote maximizers and bureaucrats as budget maximizers. He criticized politicians as vote maximizers. Politicians as vote maximizers and bureaucrats as budget maximizers. Politicians as the vote maximizers and bureaucrats as budget maximizers. Bureaucrats as the budget maximizers. Fine, again what he said, according to him, the core reason for failure of state is absence of competition and monopoly of the state. The core reason for failure of state is its monopoly and absence of competition. Monopoly and absence of competition. Hence what he says, he suggests institutional pluralism as the solution. Suggest institutional pluralism as the solution. Fine. Obviously, what do they say? I mean, overall, below that, PCT does not reject the role of traditional Weberian state. It doesn't say that Weberian state should be removed. It does not reject the role of traditional Weberian state in the society. Does not reject the role of traditional Weberian state in the society. What it says is that market has certain advantages. Market has certain advantages. If such principles are introduced in state, that's what is competition, efficiency, all those things. If such market principles, if such principles are introduced in public administration, then state will also become efficient. State will also become efficient. Fine. So this is the core of PCT. Obviously, what he did, significance of PCT. What is the significance of PCT? Public choice theory. Significance of PCT. It highlighted the inefficiency of state. Highlighted the inefficiency of big state, you can say. Highlighted the reasons or highlighted the overall inefficiency of the big state. Inefficiency of the big state. Fine. So then 2, it highlighted the reasons for the success of market and private sector. Highlighted the reasons for the success of market and private sector. Reasons for the success of the private sector, market and private sector. It is prescriptive in nature, means it suggested some solutions. It is prescriptive in nature. What does that mean? Suggested solutions to correct inefficiencies of state. Suggested solutions to address inefficiencies of state. Solutions to address the inefficiencies of state. Suggested solutions to address inefficiency of state. Fine, but what did it fail? However, PCT cannot be applied. However, PCT cannot be applied as such in public administration. That means it's not so easy to apply PCT in public administration. PCT cannot be applied as such in public administration. What are the reasons? Below that, A. First one, market works on profit, state works on public interest and service. Market works on profit, state works on public interest and service. State works on public interest and service. And then 2, functions of state like law and order, justice delivery. Functions of state like law and order, justice delivery are long-term strategic goals. They are long-term strategic goals. They are qualitative and not quantitative. They are qualitative. They are qualitative, not quantitative. Qualitative, not quantitative. Fine. If state functions like market,
when you are saying it is prescriptive in nature, can we compare like unlike NPA way of just
yes, in a way. NPA was largely descriptive. NPA largely identified that you should, in terms of values it was also prescriptive, but specific suggestions it did not give. It only said you should be like this, you should be like this.
We write it in answer like unlike NPA.
Yes, of course. Fine. Then if PCT is applied to state, if PCT is applied to state, then citizens will become consumers. Commodification of citizens, that's what has become in NPM. That's a criticism. If PCT is applied to state, like that, you can keep on extending the these points. If PCT is applied to the state, then the citizens will become customers, consumers. Citizens will become consumers. In bracket, what they call it as commodification of citizens. Commodification of citizens. Fine. Then they use something called as constitution, contradiction, paradigm, all those things. That's fine. This is the core of PCT. Now, an extension of this PCT itself is what? NPM. So, next comes your NPM. NPM, obviously too many questions are there. In here when you study NPM, so we will also study about NPS. So just put it as NPM and NPS. NPS, recently they are asking multiple questions. NPM and NPS. NPM and NPS. Fine. First let's write about NPM questions. 2022. Public management takes NPM in a way. Public management takes what and why from public administration. Public management takes, so take it as NPM only. Public management takes what and why from PA, public administration, and how from business management. It takes what and why from public administration and how from business management. How from the business, that itself, we'll write those questions first. Let's finish off. Then to 2019, we'll write about NPM questions from 2019. Has NPM failed in promoting democratic polity? Now this is the larger kind of question. They have to ask like that only. One year they'll ask how it has affected accountability. Another year they'll ask, has NPM failed in promoting democratic polity? Fine, then has NPM affected, or how NPM has affected anything? How NPM has affected? How NPM has affected various types of accountability in public administration. It's political, administrative, legal, like that. How NPM has affected various types of accountability in public administration. Fine. That itself, same question itself, see, as I keep telling, so some core question, the same question in a different way they have asked, how NPM has affected the core values of traditional administration. Same question, there is no change. Next year they have asked, NPM is neither the savior nor the devil. That means it is not very good also, it is not very bad also. NPM is neither the savior nor the devil. Again the same. That means you should write what are the advantages, what are the loopholes. Fine, that is more or less the same. And they have asked in neo-terrorism, all those things, fine. Now NPS, what kind of questions are given on NPS? NPS 2018, NPS is an improvement over NPM. NPS is an improvement. NPS is an improvement over NPM. That is 2018. Then 2020, 21, 22, more or less same kind of question. Separately we will write. NPM advocates democracy and citizenship as the basis of PA. So regularly they have asked. So that means in the recent times, rather than NPM also they have asked. But this topic is very important, NPS. NPS advocates democracy and citizenship. Democracy and citizenship as the basis of traditional PA, as the basis of PA, public administration, as the basis of public administration. Right. So these are the topics, I mean these are the kind of questions. Of course, first, I mean a very famous topic, NPM, NPS, what's up? Let's write the core first. First, tell what do you mean by NPM? NPM is, so whenever you get NPM, just write this definition in the introduction. NPM is the worldwide government restructuring program. NPM is worldwide government restructuring program. So just write this definition. Worldwide government restructuring program started in developed countries. Started in developed countries in 1980s. Some people tell 1970s also. Started in the developed countries in 1980s and developing countries in 1990s. Developing countries in 1990s. Then who coined the term? Not very important, but if you just want. The term was coined by Christopher Hood. The term was first used by Christopher Hood. First used by Christopher Hood. In his work, NPM for All Seasons. So Christopher Hood's book, first used by Christopher Hood in his book, in his work, NPM for All Seasons. NPM for All Seasons. Fine, but who is the famous contributor? However, David Osborne, OSBORNE, and Ted Gabler, David Osborne and Ted Gabler's. David Osborne and Ted Gabler's work, what they call as Rego movement. Rego means reinventing government. David Osborne and Ted Gabler's reinventing government. Reinventing government is the basis for introduction of NPM. Is the basis for introduction of NPM. Fine, that is a famous one. Obviously, what does it in simple terms means? Again, okay, what we'll do is put the below that sources for NPM. What are the various inspirations for NPM? Sources for NPM. First one is political source. Political source. Political source. So what does that mean? Just write it as Thatcherism in UK. And Reaganism in US. Thatcherism in UK and Reaganism in US, which had focused on privatization and deregulation, LPG reforms kind of, which focused on liberalization, whatever, LPG kind of reforms, which focused on privatization and deregulation, which focused on privatization and deregulation. Pabad, this is Pabad class. 11:30. Fine, focused on privatization and deregulation. So that is a political source. Obviously, whatever had then came later. Then 2, ideological source. Ideology. Ideological source. So in tables below that, public choice theory. Public choice theory and neo-Taylorism. Public choice theory and neo-Taylorism. Fine. So that neo-Taylorism, just write what do you mean by that, because on that also they can ask a question. It means, we are talking about neo-Taylorism. It means application of the Taylor's principle. Application of the Taylor's principles used in private sector, new form of Taylor's, that's why it is neo-Taylorism. Application of the Taylor's principles used in private sector in the state, in public administration. Application of Taylor's principles used in private sector in public administration. Fine. What are they? Keywords you write. It includes result orientation, performance evaluation, performance evaluation, autonomy for managers, hire and fire approach, etc. Fine. So those are the core ones that they applied. Neo-Taylorism is also one of the ideological source for NPM. Fine. Then 3, intellectual sources. That means books or movements. Intellectual sources. Under that, A, National Performance Report. National Performance Report by Al Gore, who was also the former vice president of US. National Performance Report by Al Gore. National Performance Report by Al Gore, and in US we are writing, and whatever you wrote, REGO movement, reinventing government they call it as REGO, REGO movement in US. So National Performance Report by Al Gore and REGO movement, all of them happened in US. In US. Right? Then 2, prior option review. Prior option review. Prior option review and next steps. Prior option review and next steps in UK. Next steps in UK. In bracket you can say which focused on downsizing, and agencyfication. Which focused on downsizing and agencyfication. Downsizing and agencyfication. Fine. Then Pemandu movement in Malaysia. Pemandu, Pemandu. Pemandu movement in Malaysia. Pemandu movement in Malaysia. Fine. These are the core sources of NPM. In addition, you can say, in addition, failure of big state, especially in developing countries. Failure of big state, especially in developing countries. Evolution of ICT. Evolution of ICT. Support by international organizations, IMF, World Bank. Support by the international organizations, and increase in people's awareness, and increase in the people's demand for better government. Increase in people's demand for better governance also contributed to NPM. Increase in the people's demand for better government also contributed to NPM. Contributed to NPM. That's what, in a way, the best form of NPM is what? The best form of NPM is, so all of them is summed up in, the best form of NPM is reflected in entrepreneurial government. The best form of NPM is reflected in entrepreneurial government provided by 10 commandments they call it as. Entrepreneurial government provided by David Osborne and Ted Gabler. Entrepreneurial government provided by David Osborne and Ted Gabler. What do they call it as? They call it as the 10 commandments. That means because they give 10 kind of principles, they call it as 10 commandments. Right? In fact, you can use it as a formula itself. First one, you call it as use it as an acronym. A, D, E, A, C4, D, E, M2R. If you can make another acronym, that's your wish. A, C4, that means 4 C's, D, E, M2R. Fine, what are this? For everything you have keywords. First one, A. What do you mean by A? That means what kind of government you should have? Anticipatory government. Anticipatory government. As the name itself says, what does that mean? It means government should be proactive rather than reactive. That's the core. You should anticipate the challenges. Like what even Mary MP Foley says. Anticipatory government, that is government should be proactive rather than reactive. Then what is C4? Under C you have 4. First one, catalytic government. You should act as a catalyst. Catalytic government. What does that mean? It means state should be a facilitator, enabler. State should be a facilitator and enabler for private sector and civil society. It should act as a facilitator and enabler for the private sector and civil society. That means it's based on idea, that all you know, that it's based on the idea of what? Steering rather than rowing, that kind of a one. That is 1C. First one, catalytic government. Second one, community owned government. Community owned government. Community owned government. What does that mean? Obviously, as the name itself says, it means government should be more answerable to the people. Government should be more answerable, more accountable. Government should be more answerable to the people. Government should be more answerable to the people. More answerable to the people. It should involve people at all stages of decision making. It should involve people in all stages of decision making. In all stages of decision making. Fine, if you want in bracket, if you want a kind of examples, in India, Citizens Charter, RTI, social audit are based on this idea. In India, Citizens Charter, RTI, social audit. Citizens Charter, RTI, social audit is based on this idea. Is based on this idea. So that is community owned. Then 3, competitive government. Competitive, that means it should also promote competition, it should also be competent. Competitive government. So obviously what does that mean? It means state should promote, government should promote competition, institutional pluralism. Government should promote competition and it should also be competent. State should promote competition and it should also be competent. And it should also be competent. And that's what you call as competitive. Then next one, another C, that is your community, customer oriented or client oriented. Customer oriented government. Customer oriented government. So as the name itself says, customer oriented government. It should deliver better services to the customers, clients. It should deliver better services to the customers. Value for money principle. Deliver better services for the customers, in bracket value for money principle. Value for money principle. Fine, that is 4 C's. Then D. D is for decentralized government. Decentralized government. Decentralized government. As the name itself says, that is decision making should be done at the lower levels. Decision making at the lower levels. Decision making at the lower levels. Fine, then E. E means enterprising government. Means government itself should take new initiatives. Enterprising government. Enterprising government. It means what? Government should be creative and innovative. Come up with new initiatives. Government should be creative and innovative. Enterprising government. Government should be creative and innovative. Then M2, first one, mission oriented government. Mission, M-I-S-S-I-O-N, mission oriented government. What does it in simple terms means? Government should be result oriented rather than process oriented. That means you should focus on your goals. Government should be result oriented. Should be result oriented rather than process oriented. Result oriented rather than process oriented. That is M. Another M, market oriented government. Market oriented government. Obviously, what does that mean? It means state should use the market principles to become more efficient. Neoliberalism kind of a one. State should use market principles to become more efficient. Government should use market principles to become more efficient. And then the last one, result oriented government. Result oriented government. Right. So as the name itself says, you should focus on the result. That is the entrepreneurial government concept given by same David Osborne and Ted Gabler, what they famously called as 10 commandments. A, C, 4, D, whatever. If you want, if you can make a word, you do it. But if you remember that, that will work for your entrepreneurial government. Fine. Then what is the focus on mostly? Below that, first, I mean, what do you call as this? NPM has focused on downsizing. NPM has focused on downsizing. Steering rather than rowing. Steering rather than rowing. Steering rather than rowing. Privatization. 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 Greater autonomy for managers. Greater autonomy for managers. Result orientation. Result orientation. And introduction of market principles in state. Introduction of market principles in state. Introduction of the market principles in the state. Fine, these are the core of NPM. Is it so easy? Application of these principles in developing countries is or has challenges. Application of these ideas principles in state, in public administration, in especially developing countries. Application of these ideas in developing countries has a lot of challenges. So because that itself may be a question. Application of these ideas in developing countries may be a challenge. Why is it? First one, talk about downsizing. Downsizing, what is the challenge? Downsizing. In developing countries, state acts as model employer. In developing countries, state acts as model employer. State acts as model employer. Fine. If it becomes small state, small but strong state, what they call it as, if it becomes small state through downsizing, obviously what it creates? It creates unemployment problem. It creates unemployment problem. Creates unemployment problem. We are talking about developing countries. NPM and developing countries is the is a subtopic, you can say. So obviously if you all of a sudden become, what do you call as this, if you follow downsizing, small state, debureaucratization, unemployment problem, hence what they call it as, hence developing countries need downsizing through right sizing. So you can't directly go to downsizing, we need, hence developing countries need downsizing through right sizing. Developing countries need downsizing through right sizing. Downsizing through right sizing. Obviously what does that mean? It means the size of administration should be proportional to the work performed by it. It means the size of administration should be proportional to, the strength of the administration should be proportional to the work performed by it. Size of administration should be proportional to the work performed by it. Proportional to the work performed by it. And that's what you call it as, what is the challenge there? Then what is the challenge with privatization? B, second one, privatization. Privatization.
Can you give example like railways and all these railways employees?
Everywhere you can, of course you can, all those examples you can keep on giving. What is the challenge in, what do you call as this, privatization? What is the challenge? In developing countries, privatization and disinvestment is political. Like Vizag steel plant issue, all those things. Privatization and disinvestment is political. Privatization and disinvestment is political. It is very difficult to determine. It is very difficult to determine what to privatize and how much to privatize. Because once you privatize, you can't take it back so easily. Very difficult to determine what to privatize and how much to privatize. What to privatize and how much to privatize. And how much to privatize. For example, controversy related to Vizag steel plant disinvestment. Recent controversy. Even to an extent Air India also, but Air India is settled, hence we are writing Vizag steel plant. Controversy related to the privatization, or you can say disinvestment of Vizag steel plant. Controversy related to the disinvestment of Vizag steel plant. Now that's another kind of problem related to, that means if you apply to developing countries, what will happen? Then third problem. Then we will go to the broader criticism of NPM separately. Third problem, what is the words we have used? What are the core principles we have used? Downsizing, हो गया. उसके बाद में above that you have written the ideas. Result orientation. Autonomy for private, autonomy you can say below that. Autonomy for managers. Autonomy for managers. That's what they call it as agencyfication model. Autonomy for managers. NPM calls for agencyfication. NPM demands agencyfication. NPM calls for agencyfication. So what does it in simple terms means? That is creation of autonomous, some people call it semi-autonomous also, creation of autonomous agencies, autonomous agencies which will be free from the political interference, free from the political interference. Fine, what is the best example of it? Regulatory bodies is the best example of this, like RBI, TRAI, SEBI, Regulatory bodies is best example of agencyfication. Regulatory bodies is best example of agencyfication. Is the best example of agencyfication. If you want example Indian context, example TRAI, SEBI, IRDA, etc. Fine. Now what is the problem here? The issue is, what is the issue? The controversy. The issue is ensuring a balance between the concept, the issue is ensuring balance between autonomy and accountability of regulatory bodies. How do you make them accountable also? That is a separate topic that we will discuss separately. The issue is about ensuring a balance between autonomy. In chapter 4 organizations we will discuss it. Ensuring a balance between autonomy and accountability of regulatory bodies. Ensuring a balance between autonomy and accountability of regulatory bodies. Fine. So that is a problem here. Fine. Next problem. Application of market principles, specifically you can write application of market principles in state. Application of market principles in state, that is neo-Taylorism, whatever you call them as, is problematic. Is problematic as goals are different, as the goals are different. As the goals are different. Fine, okay. Now the core issue where you get lot of questions, criticism of NPM. What are the major criticisms? How it has affected the balance? That's what is how it has affected the balance. Criticism of NPM. It has affected the balance in traditional public administration. Various types of accountability is affected. It has affected the balance in traditional PA. Affected the balance in traditional public administration. Fine. First one, balance between politicians and citizens relationship. Balance between the politicians and citizens relationship, or relationship between politicians and citizens affected. Balance between the politicians and citizens is affected. How? In a democracy, politicians are answerable to the citizens. Politicians are answerable to the citizens. Politicians are answerable to the citizens. In NPM, private sector plays greater role. NPM, private sector plays greater role. When you increase the role of private sector, two, you also start behaving like private sector. In the NPM, private sector plays greater role. Hence, state, or you can say politicians, hence politicians or state is less accountable to citizens, because citizens can't question the market. State has become less accountable to citizens. Fine, that is one way accountability affected. Then second one, it affected the balance between politicians and bureaucrats. Affected the balance between politicians and bureaucrats. Affected the balance between politicians and bureaucrats. NPM calls for greater autonomy for bureaucrats. That you use the word managers, you can call it as the word bureaucrat in administration. NPM demands, calls for greater autonomy, calls for greater autonomy for the managers. Hence, obviously what happens, hence politicians cannot question, cannot scrutiny, you can say. Hence, politician cannot question, cannot scrutiny. Politicians cannot scrutiny the performance of bureaucrats. Politicians cannot scrutiny the performance of bureaucrats regularly. Cannot scrutiny the performance of the bureaucrats regularly. This affects bureaucrats' accountability to political executive. Affects bureaucrats' accountability to political executive. To the political executive. Fine. The next one. NPM has brought back Wilson's politics administration dichotomy in a new way. NPM has brought back Wilson's politics administration dichotomy in a new manner. Means it has again brought back, that's why they keep calling it as resurgence of the Wilsonian dichotomy. It has brought back the Wilson's politics administration dichotomy in a new way. So how? NPM demands autonomy for managers. NPM demands autonomy for managers. Hence, politicians are more focused on, or politicians are subscribed to. Hence, politicians are more focused on policy formulation. Politicians more focused on policy formulation and managers on implementation. So you don't get more into implementation, they will not get into formulation. And managers are more focused on implementation. That's what is Weber, that was what even Wilson says. You focus on decision making, they focus on implementation. Fine, that's what this has brought back the dichotomy. This has revived dichotomy. That's the core idea. Fine, next one. Commodification of citizens. Commodification of citizens. Commodification of citizens. Fine. State should function based on principle of uniformity. State should function based on principle of uniformity. Based on the principle of uniformity. However, NPM transforms citizens into customers. NPM transforms citizens into customers. This affects the core principles of social contract theory. That you are answerable to them. This affects the core principles of social contract theory. Affects the core principles of social contract theory. Next one, traditional public administration. Traditional PA focuses more on process and rule accountability. That means you should follow the process properly, you should follow the rules properly. Traditional PA focuses more on process and rule accountability. Focuses more on the process and rule accountability. Focuses more on the process and rule accountability. Fine, but what does NPM focus on? NPM focuses more on results. NPM focuses more on results. This may lead to violation of laws and rules. This may lead to arbitrary violation of the laws and rules, leading to arbitrariness. Violation of laws and rules or processes, violation of the rules and processes leading to arbitrariness. Leading to the arbitrariness. Fine. So this is what you call as different types of accountability itself in a way. For example, when you say, look at it, what do you call as this, what you wrote now is the legal accountability. So link that point as legal accountability, because there is a question called as how NPM has affected various accountabilities. This what is legal account. Legal means what? You are accountable to the laws and processes that's violated. Legal accountability or process accountability they call it as. Last point is legal or process accountability or rule, any words you can use, legal or process or rule accountability. But then whatever you wrote as citizens have become customers, so that is obviously what in a way, that's in a way what do you call as this?
Legality नहीं रहे, they are not, they can't question.
That is also correct, but here when you say legal, what you are writing it is here, that means you are, rather than answering more to the laws, rules and process, now you are answerable more to the results. That affects the process accountability or legal accountability. In a way you can link legal to that also. Then whatever you have written, what do you call as this, bureaucrats were answerable to the politicians. Now lot of autonomy has come up, all this, that is called as political accountability is affected. Where you have written that point, that bureaucrats were answerable, now that answerability is gone. Political account, that's in margin, as I keep telling, in every page keep margins. Political accountability affected. Political accountability affected. Fine, then what you have written, the first point, politicians answerable to citizens, now that is gone. That is democratic accountability, that's also gone. That's what you call it as the traditional administration. First point what you have written, that politicians were answerable to the citizens, now marketplace, greater role, all those things is democratic accountability. Democratic accountability. Fine? Yeah, that's what managerial accountability is. Managers autonomy, all those things you have given, all those things, that's called as managerial accountability. Fine, that means remember you have written a point called as dichotomy is brought back, that is called as managerial accountability. So all those things are in a way the criticisms of NPM. That's where you have actually the most of the questions. What you wrote now, this is where you get most of the questions from. Fine. Obviously you can write significance of NPM also in a way. Significance of NPM. Some positives. A lot of positives are also there. Significance of NPM. First what it did, it has redefined what Nicholas Henry calls it as. It has redefined the role of state. It has redefined the role of state. In bracket, as said by Nicholas Henry. Redefined the role of state. Nicholas Henry. Obviously, what is it now? State, that is in simple terms, steering rather than rowing. Facilitator, enabler, whatever you call them as, steering rather than rowing. Steering rather than rowing. Fine, then 2. So what can state do obviously then? Small state has led to outsourcing non-core activities to other actors. Outsourcing non-core activities outsourcing the non-core activities to other actors, and state focusing on core functions. State focusing on core functions. And state focusing on the core functions. Then LPG reforms, 1991 LPG reforms is based on idea of NPM. In Indian context, if you want to mention, 1991 LPG reforms is based on the principles of NPM. Based on the principles of NPM. Then state has become more efficient. State has become more efficient. It has become more efficient. For example, professionalism in PSUs. For example, professionalism in PSUs post LPG reforms. Professionalism in the PSUs post the LPG reforms. Post the LPG reforms. Fine. Then tools like outsourcing, contracting, user fees. Tools like outsourcing, contracting, user fee, PPP, because all of them are in a way NPM only, has made the state more efficient. Has made the state more efficient and improved service delivery. Has made state more efficient and improved service delivery. And improved the service delivery. Fine. Then downsizing through right sizing. Downsizing through right sizing improved the fiscal health of the state. Downsizing through right sizing has improved the fiscal health of the state. Improved the fiscal health of the state. Fine. So these are all kind of positives that you keep on that you can keep on writing. But now the point is how this was addressed again by NPS, the most important one. NPS, New Public Service. So obviously we know first 2-3 chapters are very big. If you complete that, then the next chapters will be relatively easy. NPS, New Public Service Approach. Fine. Obviously given by whom? Given by Denhart and Denhart, that means the couples Robert Denhart and Janet Denhart. This concept was given by Denhart and Denhart. Denhart and Denhart, same. Robert Denhart, Janet Denhart, that is husband and wife. Given by Denhart and Denhart. Then obviously what is it? It is an alternative to NPM. It is an alternative to NPM. It is an alternative to NPM. Fine, what is it based on? It is based on 7 principles. It is based on 7 principles. First one, accountability. Accountability. Second one, citizens rather than customers. Citizens rather than customers. Citizens rather than customer. Third one, citizenship rather than entrepreneurship. Citizenship rather than entrepreneurship. Citizenship rather than entrepreneurship. The next one, serve rather than steer. So you should serve, state should serve rather than steer. Serve rather than steer. Fine. Then next one, think strategically, act democratically. Think strategically, act democratically. Think strategically, act democratically. Fine. Then next one, public interest is the core, not the byproduct. Public interest is the core, not a byproduct. So don't take it as a, in addition you will get it, or as a result of it you will ensure public interest. Public interest itself is the core of traditional public administration. Public interest is the core, not the byproduct. Then people rather than productivity or profit. Don't focus on productivity or profit, focus on whom? People. People rather than profit or productivity. People rather than profit or productivity. So we wrote 7, right? Yeah, these are the core principles of NPS. That's where you have so many questions, that NPM advocates democracy, citizenship as the basis, all those things is the core idea. Now obviously what it has done, it has called for re-engineering of the traditional PA. It has called for a re-engineering of traditional PA. Re-engineering of traditional PA. So what it demands? It has called for re-engineering of traditional PA. Bureaucrats should recognize their social moral accountability. Bureaucrats should recognize their social moral accountability. They should recognize their social and moral accountability. They should recognize their social and moral accountability. And what is their core idea? According to them, state cannot function like market. It has a larger purpose. According to them, state cannot function like market. It has a larger purpose. It has a larger goal. State cannot function like market. It has a larger purpose. Right? So see, that's what is the questions in a way about NPS, that multiple ways, that NPS is an improvement over NPM. So look at it, whatever you wrote, obviously it's an improvement over NPM. That's what is your 2018 question. 2020 question, NPS advocates democracy and citizenship as the basis of PA. So that's what is your, so it's a very famous, whenever you write NPS, you can't write NPS directly, you should have a comparison with NPM also. Fine, especially when it is 15 or 20 marker. If you remember that, then automatically the solution for NPM is your NPS. Then we have to write about LPG, impact of LPG on public administration. There what all we'll write about state versus market and impact of what do you call as this, globalization on public administration, all those things we'll write. We're left with only 2 topics. Just write this question, then we'll take some 10 minutes break and then we'll continue. Impact of LPG on public administration, this is the next topic. If you finish this, then we can focus on answer writing. At least we have already discussed few questions in your short test, but in addition, impact of LPG on public administration. What all questions have been asked? Relatively it is less. 2019, impact of globalization and MNCs on PA. Impact of globalization and MNCs on public administration. So in simple terms, how globalization has affected public administration. Fine. Then 2015, globalization has transformed welfare state into corporate state. Globalization has transformed welfare state into corporate state. Transformed welfare state into corporate state. This is 2015. Then the very old question 1999 is there, but that's not necessary because that is in a way your paper to impact of LPG on PSUs. That anyhow, remember we study about PSUs in paper 2, there you can study that. These are the only two questions that you can find on LPG. Fine, but the globalization topic which also gets repeated in your development dynamics chapter. So what we'll do is this and that will combine and write once for all, so that we don't have to do it again in globalization, what do you call as this development dynamics. So strong state versus market, strong state versus market, what are different views. Fine, then what is the impact of globalization on public administration, on developing countries. Once for all we'll write all of them. Fine, we'll take some 10 minutes break. Class will continue till 11:15, 11:20, another 2 hours. We'll come back in 10-15 minutes. Yeah, okay. First, let's start about state versus market, then we'll write about globalization. So that both the topics we complete. It's a topic in, as I said, development administration chapter also, development dynamics. If I put the heading state versus market, the overall context of this, you should have it in mind. State versus market. Obviously, what is it? It is a very old topic, very old debate. It is very old debate. Fine. First is obviously what? Adam Smith. Adam Smith, classical economics era. Adam Smith, classical economics era. Obviously what he called for? Greater role for market. Adam Smith, classical economics, greater role for market. Then reverse, Karl Marx, greater role for state. In fact, abolition of private property, all those basics you know. Karl Marx, greater role for state. Writing a kind of context you are setting. Greater role for state. Then below that, US, laissez-faire state. US, laissez-faire state. Laissez-faire state, obviously what is it? Yeah, in simple terms, based on Adam Smith's ideas. Market will have its own invisible hand, based on Adam Smith's idea. Based on Adam Smith's idea. It means greater role for market in simple terms. Adam Smith's idea. Fine. Then, few factors led to emergence of welfare state concept. So, laissez-faire to welfare state. Few factors led to emergence of welfare state concept in 20th century. Emergence of the welfare state concept in 20th century. Now, what are those factors? First one, 1929 US Great Depression. 1929 US Great Depression. 1929 US Great Depression. Point number 2, success of USSR economic model. Success of USSR economic model. Point number 3, European reconstruction after Second World War led by state. European reconstruction, in fact Western European reconstruction after Second World War led by state. In simple terms, in bracket, Marshall Plan. European reconstruction after the Second World War led by the state, which is called as Marshall Plan. Fine. Then next one, emergence of independent countries. Emergence of the independent countries after Second World War's decolonization. Emergence of independent countries after Second World War's decolonization. Second World War's decolonization. Right? So obviously this is the one. Just to mention, welfare state was based on John, or you can say Keynesian ideas of economics. It was based on John Maynard Keynes' idea of economics or idea of welfare state. John Maynard Keynes' ideas which called for greater role of state. John Maynard Keynes' idea which demanded greater role for state. Which demanded greater role for the state. Right? That is one context, how the concept of welfare state emerged. This led to what? Welfare state led to, so that you understand the overall history, welfare state led to emergence of big state. That anyhow we have already mentioned. Welfare state led to emergence of big state. Emergence of the big state, which was later criticized as nanny state, which was later criticized as nanny state. Later criticized as the nanny state. Then what is the context here? Washington Consensus. Washington Consensus again demand, what did they demand? Washington Consensus demanded greater role of private sector. Washington Consensus demanded greater role of private sector. Washington Consensus demanded greater role of private sector. Greater role of private sector. Then the same in 1980s, NPM demanded, NRP, NPM all combinedly. In 1980s, NRP, New Right Philosophy, NPM demanded small but strong state. So that anyhow we have already discussed. 1980s, NRP and NPM demanded small but strong state. NRP and NPM demanded small but strong state. Fine, that is the idea. The state has to be very strong to control all those things. If you want, just write that one statement. State should be strong. State should be strong in terms of. State should be strong in terms of intelligence. State should be strong in terms of intelligence, technology, skills, finances, regulation, regulation to control the market. To control the market. Fine, few basics they have already settled. World Bank in its various reports has clarified that both state and market have greater role to play in the society. Both state and market have a greater role to play in society. What has it suggested? It has suggested pragmatic neoliberal economic model. World Bank has suggested 1997 report में pragmatic neoliberal economic model. So just copy this. It's like interlink, that's it. You can weigh any which way. Some people write it like rule of law. All of them are interlinked. So arrow marks may differ. Some people write it at both as downways. Actually, it's all interlinked. This is World Bank's neoliberal, pragmatic neoliberal economic model. Means you can provide for greater role for market, but a lot of things we need to balance. But there are so many other views there, we'll write all of them. Fine. What do you call as this World Bank? First let's write about World Bank. According to World Bank, state should focus on certain roles. Means even though you provide role for market, you have certain roles to play. According to World Bank, state should focus on certain functions, certain roles. State should focus on certain roles. First one is macroeconomic stabilization. Macroeconomic stabilization. So that is role of the state. Macroeconomic stability. In simple terms, what? That's what is your word macroeconomic means. Fiscal deficit, unemployment rate, all those things government should take care. That is fiscal deficit, BOP, whatever you call them as, all of that macroeconomic parameters government should take care. Fine, that is one. Then two, macro social responsibility. Macro means at a larger scale. Macro social responsibility. Macro social responsibility, in simple terms, welfare of vulnerable sections. In bracket, welfare of vulnerable sections. That's what is macro social responsibility. Welfare of the vulnerable sections. Fine. Then three, macro environmental stability. In simple terms, environment conservation. Macro environmental health, macro environmental stability. Macro environmental stability. And then human capital formation. In simple terms, education, health. Human capital formation. There is education, health. Fine. Then regulations for the market and rule of law. Regulations for the market and rule of law. Now all those things government only should take care. That's what is World Bank telling. Regulating the private sector and the rule of law. Fine. So then below that you can write Joan Robinson. These are criticism parts. Joan, Joan, Joan Robinson criticized greater role of market. Criticized greater role of market. What he said? He said market doesn't operate by invisible hands, market operates by strangulation. According to him, market, like what Adam Smith says, market does not operate by invisible hands. Market does not operate through invisible hands, it operates through strangulation. It does not operate by invisible hands, it operates through strangulation. Strangulate, that means suffocate. It operates through strangulation. Fine. Next one, what do you call as this? Amartya Sen and Jean Reze. Amartya Sen and Jean Reze says, that is according to them, Amartya Sen and Jean Reze says that it is not the failure of big state, that it is not the failure of big state, because everybody were telling big state failed. What they tell is it is not the failure of the big state, it is a failure of prioritization of the activities of the state. Means state did not determine where should it function. It is not the failure of the big state, it is the failure of prioritization. It is the failure of prioritization of the activities of the state. Failure of the prioritization of activities of the state. What does that in simple terms means? It means government over involved in unnecessary activities. Like it was involved in running maintenance of hotels, also manufacture of pens, pencils, all those things. Why should you do? Government got over involved in the unnecessary activities. That is what Amartya Sen and Jean Reze says. Fine. Then next one below that, Amit, what do you call as this? Amit Baduri and Deepak Nair. Amit Baduri and Deepak Nair. Fine. State should perform three important roles. State should perform three important roles. Should perform three important roles. First one they call it as functional. A is functional. Functional means education, health issues. Education, health, human capital. So that you should only take care. Education, health, that is functional. Second one, institutional. Second is institutional. In simple terms, regulations, rule of law. Regulations, rule of law. Third one, strategic intervention. Strategic intervention. Market focuses on short-term profits. Market focuses on short-term profits. Hence, what should state do? State should stress on long-term strategic goals. State should stress on long-term strategic goals. State should stress on the long-term strategic goals. Fine. Then even Paul Street and all those things are, but it is more or less the same. As suggested by World Bank, Southeast Asian economies, what they call as Asian tigers, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, Taiwan. As suggested by World Bank, Southeast Asian economies, socially responsible market economies. Socially responsible market economies is the way forward. Socially responsible market economies is the way forward. So, whenever it is state versus market, just write World Bank's neoliberal economic, pragmatic this one, and you write all these things, it is more than obvious. State versus market or strong state versus market. Now, as an extension of this is your next topic, impact of globalization on public administration. Impact of globalization on public administration. In general on administration or developing countries, all those things. Impact of globalization. And again, there are multiple views here. First one, positive view. Positive view, Samuel Huntington. Positive view, positive view is Francis Fukuyama. Samuel Huntington is negative. Positive view first, Francis Fukuyama. Francis Fukuyama. What is his famous work? The End of History and the Last Man. That is his famous book. The End of History and the Last Man. The End of History and the Last Man. What does he say? According to him, democracy and liberalism will continue forever. Democracy and liberalism will continue forever. Hence, globalization will positively affect everybody, every country. Globalization will have positive impact on all the countries. Globalization will have positive impact on all the countries. Fine. Then negative view. Negative view. Samuel Huntington. Negative view. Samuel Huntington. The Clash of Civilizations. There is this famous book. Negative view. Samuel Huntington. The Clash of Civilizations. The Clash of Civilizations. Again, what does he say? According to him, globalization leads to increase in the cultural ethnic conflicts. According to him, globalization leads to increase in religious, cultural, ethnic conflict, value system based. Globalization leads to religious, cultural, ethnic conflict. Fine. Then balanced view. Balanced view. Friedrichs, syntropy. Balanced view, Friedrichs. Syntropy. 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 Actually, you have to split it, right? Like if you can recall, like what Rick says, same like syntropy means what? Synthesis plus entropy. Syntropy, synthesis plus entropy. That means one hand you will have integration, other hand you will have disintegration, positive as well as negative. Syntropy, that is synthesis plus entropy, integration plus disintegration. That's what you call it as syntropy. That is balanced view. Fine. Now, impact of globalization on developing countries. Then we will write public administration specifically. Impact of globalization on developing countries. Impact of globalization on developing countries. First one is loss of sovereignty. Loss of sovereignty. So how does sovereignty gets lost? Globalization has created global elite, that is multilateral institution. Globalization has created global elite of multilateral institutions. Created global elite of multilateral institutions. So what did this lead to? This has led to global constitutionalism. This has led to global constitutionalism. Global constitutionalism. What does that mean? That is laws and rules of World Bank, UN, IMF. Laws, rules of World Bank, UN, IMF is imposed on developing countries. Laws and rules of UN, IMF, World Bank, whatever you call them as, is imposed on developing countries. Is imposed on developing countries. imposed on the developing countries. Fine. That's what you call it as loss of sovereignty. That means now, I mean, whatever others do, whatever what the so-called global institutions do, you have to listen. That's called as loss of sovereignty. Second one, loss of democracy. Loss of democracy. Loss of democracy. What does that mean? Democracy is a bottom-up process. Democracy is a bottom-up process. Bottom-up process. But global elites laws is a global elites laws and rules is a top-down process. Is a top-down process. Is a top-down process. And what are they not? Those institutions are not accountable to the people, citizens of developing countries also. Means how can we question developing World Bank or anybody? Those countries, those institutions are not answerable, are not accountable to the citizens of developing countries. So that's what obviously loss of democracy, not answerable to the citizens of developing countries. Fine, all extension of the same point. Then loss of public space, public dialogue, public opinion, loss of public space. So obviously what does that mean? In traditional state, people's opinion is the foundation. In a traditional state, people's opinion is the foundation of decision making. People's opinion, people's feedback is the foundation of decision making. Obviously here what will happen? Because of global elite, people's opinion has no scope. People's opinion has no scope. When that is loss of public space. Then loss of community. Loss of community. Globalization led to a dominance of MNCs in developing countries. Globalization led to dominance of MNCs in developing countries. Dominance of MNCs in developing countries. Obviously what happened? This led to displacement of local people, cultures, etc. This led to displacement of the local people, their culture, etc. And if you want simple one, you can tell example, Niyamgiri issue, Odisha. Dongira Kon tribes, all those things, or recently in Hasdiya Aranya issue is going on in Jharkhand, all those things. Fine. What do you call this? Niyamgiri hills, Niyamgiri tribes, not tribes, Niyamgiri hill issue, Odisha. Fine. So these are all specific impact on developing countries. Okay. We can also, if you want another one, you can write Professor Huck's loss of bargaining power of developing countries. This also is an impact. Professor Huck, H-A-Q-U-E. Professor Huck's loss of bargaining power. Loss of bargaining power of developing countries. Loss of bargaining power of developing countries. What does that mean? It means emergence of global issues. emergence of global issues like terrorism, global warming, climate change. Emergence of global issues like terrorism, climate change. Emergence of global issues like terrorism, climate change, and MNCs, emergence of MNCs, and the MNCs have reduced the power of the state to control issues, power of developing countries, bargaining power, has reduced the power of developing countries to control the issues. Reduce the power of the developing countries to control the issues. Right? So that is specifically on developing countries. Now another one, kind of course link will be there, impact of globalization on administration. Specific impact of globalization on administration. Point number 1, it has affected traditional role of state in allocation of resources. It has affected traditional role of the states, traditional role of the state in allocation of resources. Affected the traditional role of state in the allocation of resources. In the allocation of resources. In simple terms, you can tell, for example, Article 39, Clause B, Clause C. Article 39, Clause B, Clause C. Clause B and Clause C wants the state, demands the state. Article 39, DPSP, 39, Clause B and Clause C demands the state to control utilization of resources, distribution, utilization. To control, if you can recall, 39B is your use the resources for common good of society, Clause C is your prevent concentration of resources. It demands for utilization and distribution of resources. Utilization and distribution of resources. Now obviously here what happens? Now private sector plays greater role, that means because of globalization. Now private sector plays greater role. Now private sector plays greater role. Obviously, hence what affected? Hence this role is affected. Hence this role is affected. This role is affected. Then second criticism, administrative state has transformed into, that means traditional state is administrative state. Administrative state has transformed into coercive state or corporate state. Administrative state transformed into coercive state or corporate state. Coercive state or corporate state. What does that mean? It means state is functioning like a private sector. It means state is functioning like a private sector. State is functioning like a private sector and it uses force, that's why it is called as coercive, and it uses force to suppress any protest against market. And it uses force to suppress, any movement, any protest against private sector. This is the criticism, and that it uses force to suppress any movement against or any protest against private sector. That is administrative state becoming corporate state or coercive state. In fact, what some people do is you can make two columns, you will understand the differences. Make two columns. On one hand you write administrative state, other hand you write corporate state. What are the few differences that you can identify? Administrative state, corporate state. Administrative state, corporate state. Fine. When you say administrative state, focus on citizens. So here the concept is citizenship is important. Traditional Weberian state. When you say corporate state, name itself says obviously what is it here? Focus on consumers, customers. Here the focus is on citizens, there the focus is on customers or consumers. Fine. Then administrative state means what? Big state, welfare state. Administrative state means big state. Obviously corporate state means what? Small state. Small state, strong state, etc. Here it is big state, there it is small state. Fine, there. Here the third one, administrative state. Focus on rules and process. Focus on rules and process. There is administrative. Corporate is what obviously? Focus on the results, goals. Means you should achieve more. Focus on results. Focus on results. Fine, then administrative state. Focus on public interest. Focus on public interest, service. Corporate state name itself says focus on profit, productivity. Fine, then under administrative state, accountability to citizens and elected representatives. Accountability to citizens and elected representatives. Accountability to market. Fine, these are the differences between what you call it as administrative state, corporate state. Those are all, in fact, that itself is your answers. In a way, we are writing the points for your answers also. Fine, then what is the next? Another one, impact of LPG on or globalization on traditional administration, we are writing the points. Third one, I mean, forget, in the tabular column, make it as third, fourth, whatever the points that you are writing under subheading. Big state has become small state. This is because of impact of globalization on administration. Big state has become small state. Big state has become small state. Obviously, what is it called it as? That is downsizing, debureaucratization. Size of the government has reduced. Downsizing and debureaucratization. Downsizing, debureaucratization. Fine, then impact of globalization or emergence of globalization means global issues, local issues. Impact of globalization. That is, for local issues, a traditional state looks very big. To address local issues, traditional state looks very big. Means some local problems in a village, all those things, the traditional administrative state looks very big. To address local issues, traditional state looks very big. Fine, in bracket, if what do you mean by local issues means rural level problems, village level problems, that is village level problems. Like some local water issue there, some agriculture issue there, traditional administrative state looks very big. Then to address global issues like terrorism, climate change, to address global issues like terrorism, climate change, administration looks very small because you can't address on your own. To address global issues like terrorism, climate change, traditional state looks very small. Traditional state looks very small. Fine. The next one, ability of the state. Ability of the state to frame to frame rules for environmental control, environmental conservation, labor conditions, ability of the state to frame regulations, rules for environmental conservation, labor welfare is affected. Labor welfare is affected. Fine, this is all specifically impact of globalization on public administration. Fine, obviously, I mean, some, of course, to an extent, a lot of positives are also there, that it has improved all those things, NPM impact itself. But what should they do then? Hence, the capacity building of the administrators should be improved. Capacity building of administrators should be improved. Capacity building of administrators should be improved. They should develop the ability. This is a way forward, conclusion which you can use. Capacity building of the administrators should be improved. They should have the ability to defend interest of developing countries, especially in global forums. They should have the ability to defend interests of developing countries, interests of the developing countries in the global forum, in the multilateral institutions, in the global forum. Fine. If you want to, for example, India defended its food security issue in WTO. India has defended its food security issue in WTO. India has defended its food security issue in WTO. Fine. Actually, these are all additional points. Just we can write. As said by John McMurtry, 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 as said by John McMurtry. John McMurtry, globalization suffers from the value program. Globalization suffers from value program, value problem also you can say. It suffers from the value problem. It assumes that whatever market does is efficient. It assumes that whatever market does is efficient. Whatever market does is efficient. Whatever state does is inefficient. Whatever market does is efficient. Whatever state does is inefficient. Whatever state does is inefficient unless it helps the market. Whatever state does is inefficient unless it helps the market. Unless it helps the market. That's what they call it as John McMurtry's the value program. Fine. Even the same way, in a way, Professor Huck criticizes. The accountability issues in an NPM state or globalized corporate state. Professor Huck criticizes accountability issues. Professor Huck criticizes accountability issues in globalized corporate NPM state. Globalized corporate NPM state. But yeah, correct. but that is not global hunger index. HDI ka basics he had given in the beginning, but I am not sure is the same Haq, because that was Pakistan's economist. This one I am not sure, but the idea is very good. He calls it as what, why and how of accountability. First one, what aspect of accountability, what should be in single inverted, what aspect, that means what are you accountable to today, what aspect of accountability. Fine. According to him, corporate state, NPM state, according to him, corporate state is accountable to, according to him, corporate state is accountable to, corporate state is accountable to what? Profits, results, ease of doing business. So that is what you are accountable to. Corporate state is accountable to profits, results, ease of doing business, etc. But what should you be accountable? However, traditional state should be accountable to, service, public interest. Traditional state should be accountable to service, public interest, ease of living or quality of living, you can say. Service, public interest, quality of living. So what should you be accountable to has varied. So what are you accountable to? Then two, who are you accountable to, or who is corporate state accountable to? That means to whom are you accountable? Who is the, or who aspect of accountability, anything you can write. Who is the corporate state accountable to? Fine. So who is the accountable? Below that again, corporate state is accountable to customers, private sector, MNCs. Corporate state is accountable to customers, private sector, MNCs. So that is who are you accountable to. But traditional state should be accountable to citizens. However, traditional state should be accountable to citizens. However, traditional state should be accountable to citizens. Traditional state should be accountable to the citizens. Then that is what, who, why, not, this is how. How aspect of accountability. How aspect of accountability. Fine. In a traditional state, triple chain of accountability exists. In a traditional state, triple chain of accountability exists. Triple chain of accountability exists. So what does that mean? Bureaucrats answerable to politicians. Bureaucrats answerable to politicians. Who are answerable to legislature. Who are answerable to legislature. Which is answerable to citizens. Triple chain exists. Bureaucrats to politicians, politicians to legislature, legislature to whom? To the citizens. Obviously, because of NPM, what happened? Because of NPM, we have already written this point. Because of NPM, autonomy for bureaucrats increases. Because of NPM, autonomy for managers increases. Because of NPM, autonomy for the managers increases. So obviously what then? Hence, less accountable to politicians. Autonomy for the managers increases, hence less accountable to politicians.
less accountable to the politicians. That is, how are you accountable? So, how aspect is also affected here. That's what Professor Ruck's criticism of NPM, even if they call if they call it as what do you call this NPM also, global impact also, or corporate state also, all of them obviously you can write the same points. Fine. That is what, in fact, we have written the answers also in a way for the previous year questions. What you have written it here: impact of globalization on public administration. What is the impact of globalization transforming welfare state? Also, if they ask, it also means traditional state only, administrative state only. Different names they may use, it all means the same. Remember, when they tell Weber state or classical state, traditional state, orthodox state, welfare state, administrative state, all of them one or other way means the same. If you have doubt, please write in margin, because that's how they may try to confuse, but don't get confused. All those words remain the same. Got it? What all? Weber state, classical, all of the words remain the same. Weber's state or classical state, traditional state, orthodox state, welfare state, administrative state. See, big state, all of them same. Weber, classical, traditional, orthodox, big state, welfare state, administrative state. One or other way, all of them same. Let them give any word, you write the same answer. Fine. Same way you reverse it. If they call it as small state, globalized state, corporate state, NPM state, same time you write the same. Small state, corporate state, globalized state, NPM state. Fine. Sometimes they use the word coercive state. All of them one or other way remain the same. So if they use the words, don't get confused. What is this? The answer comes back to the same. Fine. They just play with the words. As we keep telling in public administration, the answer will always be in the question. That's the strength and weakness of PubAd. If you understand the demand of the question properly, answer is automatically done, because the content will keep on flowing. If you have revised it properly, of course. So if you have revised multiple times, core content will remain the same. Point is, you should understand the demand properly, because they play with the wordings. They don't ask direct question. They'll try to round tripping kind of a one. Fine. That is in a way globalize this. As I said, development dynamics topic also we wrote. Now the last major important topic under chapter 1, because obviously we know chapter 1 and chapter 2 are very, very big. Good governance. Good governance. And this we will also write few points about network governance, so that overall governance gets covered. Fine. This is obviously time and again they keep asking 2021. What is the question? So this is actually about network governance. Governance is about managing self-governing networks. Governance is about managing self-governing networks. This is the question on network governance. We will write some points about that. It is about managing the self-governing networks. 2020. Focus on good governance. Focus towards good governance is because of the shift towards hollow state. Because of the shift towards hollow state and third party government. Is because of the shift towards hollow state and third party government. You already written third party government, joined up government, co-owned government, all of them. That is 2020. 2019. Good governance is neither a paradigm nor a panacea to the problems of PA. GG, good governance is neither a paradigm. It is neither a paradigm nor a panacea. Panacea means one-step solution. PANACEA. It is neither a paradigm nor a panacea to the ills, to to the problems of PA, public administration. Neither a paradigm nor a panacea to the ills of public administration. Then again 2019, good governance has forced public administration. Good governance has forced public administration to shed its statist character. Statist means strong state, big state. It has forced public administration to shed. To shed means give up. We will discuss those questions. In fact, most of the questions, the important aspect we have already discussed in that shortest discussion itself. Whichever is left out, I will discuss few ones. To shed its statist. Statist means strong state character. Then 2014, it's a rare question. Kind of to an extent B, but sometimes C also. Good governance and governmentality, concept given by Michael Foucault. Good governance and governmentality run on parallel lines. 2014. Good governance and governmentality runs on parallel lines. Runs on parallel lines. Then 2004, democracy and good governance contradict each other. 2004, democracy and good governance contradict each other. Democracy and good governance contradict each other. Fine. As I said here, so you have to in simple terms, what do you mean by governance, what do you mean by good governance, what do you mean by network governance, all of those things, because good governance has, when you say governance, it has multiple, what do you call as this kind of definitions. Simple governance, the broader concept called as good governance, and more democratic concept called as network governance also. Fine. First you should tell what is government and governance first. Government is a institution or an actor. Government is an institution or an actor, like the state. Government is an institution or an actor. Governance is the process. Governance is the process through which government is run. Governance is the process through which government is run. Process through which the government is run. It includes various steps involved in. It includes the various steps involved in the decision making. It includes various steps involved in the decision making and its implementation. Various stakeholders or steps involved in the decision making and its implementation. Fine, that is basic what do you mean by governance, good governance. Fine, then we have to link to the concept of good governance now. For that, lay the base. During the Cold War era, World Bank provided aid with advice. World Bank provided aid with advice, that should be in single inverted underline, aid with advice for the developing countries. This is because of, in bracket, insistence of US. Aid with advice for the developing countries because of the insistence of US. And then gradually what happened? Post Cold War, in other words, post the disintegration of USSR. Post Cold War, World Bank provided aid with conditionalities. See, aid with advice became aid with conditionality. Post Cold War, World Bank provided aid with conditionality. So aid with advice became aid with conditionality. Fine. Now, just to give it a link, World Bank introduced the term good governance. World Bank introduced the term good governance for the first time. Introduced the term good governance for the first time in its 1989 report on Sub-Saharan Africa. World Bank introduced the term good governance for the first time in its 1989 report on Sub-Saharan Africa. 1989 report on Sub-Saharan Africa. Fine, how did it define? In 1992 report, same in World Bank's, in its 1992 report, what is the name? Governance and Development. That's the 1992 World Bank's report name, Governance and Development. GG, that is good governance, is defined as, in the World Bank's 1992 report, Governance and Development, good governance is defined as the manner of exercise of power. It is defined as the manner of exercise of power. The manner of exercise of power in the utilization of resources. That is the social, economic, human, everything. The manner of exercise of power. That means how do you use the power in the utilization of the resources of the country for the development purpose. In the utilization of the country's resources for the development purpose. That's what is good governance. World Bank's definition of good governance is what you wrote now. When the question is on good governance, you should just put that. The manner of exercise of powers in utilizing the country's resources for the development purpose. That's the good governance definition given by World Bank in its 1992 report. Fine, in the same report it said, World Bank included 4 components in good governance. Later it kept on adding, World Bank included 4 components in good governance. That's what some people, just to make your answer like how you write this, like that. When you write this, you just write like this. When you say good governance, World Bank has included 4 components. What are they? So one hand you write accountability. Accountability. Then information and transparency. Accountability, information and transparency. Information and transparency. Then third one, public sector management. In other words, reforms in PSUs. Public sector management. Not just reforms in PSUs, very broader term. Public sector management. And fourth one, rule of law. Rule of law. So these are the 4 components according to World Bank which are part of good governance. Later what it did? Later it added justice delivery, human rights, justice delivery, human rights, justice delivery, human rights. Fine, what else? Free and fair elections. Free and fair elections as part of good governance. So many are there, etc. as part of good governance. So that you should if you ensure this, development will happen is what World Bank is telling. Etc. as part of good governance. So this is what you call it as World Bank's idea of good governance. These components should be there. If you ensure these components, we will give you help. If you, that's what is aid with conditionality. These are the conditions. If you don't provide these conditions, then we are not going to get the additional aid. That is as simple as that. Fine, that is World Bank's concept of good governance. Obviously, what you have to write for this? Criticisms. Criticisms. What did that lead to? Criticism by Kenneth Stove. Kenneth. Criticism by Kenneth. Kenneth Stove, Stowe. Criticism by Kenneth Stove. Fine. According to him, in fact, there were so many people, 2-3 people who gave that. According to him, good governance is an instrumental concept. Good governance is an instrumental concept. When you say instrumental, what does that mean? That is means to an end. Good governance is an instrumental concept, that is means to an end. That means you are ensuring it not for the same, just for the same purpose of it. What does that mean? What does that mean? It is means to private sector's performance, private sector's favor. That is means to the help of private sector. So you are not ensuring transparency, accountability just for the sake of it. You are ensuring it for yourself, for the help of the private sector is what he criticized. That it is instrumental, it is means to an end. Again, to what he said. Good governance is a universal, non-ecological concept. You can keep writing in points. Good governance is a universal, non-ecological concept. Means what? That is not suitable for developing countries. That is not suitable for the developing countries. Not suitable for the developing countries. Not suitable for the developing countries. Then it is a quantitative concept. It is a quantitative concept. Fine, but democracy is a qualitative concept. But democracy is a qualitative concept. Fine, these are some few criticisms by Kenneth Stove. Then who else criticized? Criticism by Professor Neerja Gopal. Criticism by Professor Neerja Gopal. More or less same criticism. Good governance is non-ecological concept. Good governance is a non-ecological concept. Fine. It has succeeded in Southeast Asian economies, or it is based on Southeast Asian economies' success. It is based on Southeast Asian economies, whatever you wrote, Southeast Asian economies' success. Based on the success of the Southeast Asian economies which have soft authoritarian powers. Success of the Southeast Asian economies which have soft authoritarian powers. Soft authoritarian powers. That means what? Obviously it means. Hence it is not suitable in democratic developing countries. Hence it is not suitable in the democratic developing countries. Not suitable in the democratic developing countries. Means it may work in some other countries, but the point is here we have democracy, a lot of people, imports, everything will be have. How will you implement them? Is one point. In fact, what some people do, make 2 columns: good governance, development, democracy. Good governance, democracy. Good governance, democracy. Fine, how they differentiate. When you say good governance, top-down process, top-down imposition, means because World Bank is giving it, you have to, it's a kind of top-down process, someone is giving it to you. The moment you say democracy, by definition, what is it? Bottom-up process. Democracy means bottom-up process. Fine. The moment you say good governance, universal. So that means it is common for everybody across the world. The moment you say democracy, diversity. Diversity. Then good governance, non-ecological, democracy, ecological. Ecological. Then good governance, means to an end. The end is greater performance of private sectors, and this is the criticism part. Means to an end. Democracy is what? End in itself. Democracy, end in itself. Okay, it's in a way, but if you want to bring in, good governance means no role of people's consultation, no scope of people's consultation. People's opinion, consultation, that concept itself is not there. Here, greater role of people's consultation. Fine. That's what in a way who says, Professor Atul Kohli criticizes good governance as, Professor Atul Kohli criticizes good governance as two-track politics. Criticizes good governance as two-track politics. What do you mean by two-track? It means it will create formal because it is telling free fair elections, everything, but it will create formal electoral democracy. It will create formal electoral democracy. Formal electoral democracy in the form of, it will create formal electoral democracy in the form of free and fair elections. In the form of free and fair elections. Free and fair elections, transparency, accountability, human rights, etc. Transparency, accountability, human rights, etc. But what will be compromised? However, as it is a top-down process, people's participation, public interest will be compromised, will be diluted. Public interest will be diluted. Fine. Now that is called as two-track politics. That is good governance as a concept, World Bank concept if you take. Now network governance, that's what sometimes they use the word governance. Network governance. Network governance. What does it mean? Remember yesterday we had written that somewhere. Sometimes they use only the word governance. When you say governance and third party, all those things, they are referring to this. When you say network governance, that means who all? State, private, civil society. All combination is what you call as network governance, or sometimes governance also they use the term. So don't get confused. I am again clarifying. Even if they use the term only governance, That means they are referring to network governance concept. All of them working together. Fine, called it as third party government, all of those things, joined up government, all those things, keywords will come back here. Fine, yeah, clarify those points. It means, or here, whatever, here, state will act as a facilitator, enabler, catalyst, linking pin. All of them means the same term. Here the state will act as a facilitator, enabler, catalyst, linking pin. So all of them same words. What does it call it as? It is called as redefinition of the role of the state by Nicholas Henry. It is called as redefinition, called as the redefinition of role of the state. Redefinition of the role of the state by Nicholas Henry. Redefinition of the role of the state by Nicholas Henry. Fine. So that is the core idea. What should the state do? State should make the best use of. State should make the best use of. State should make the best use of the abilities of, strength of. State should make the best use of the ability of both private sector and civil society. Make the best use of the abilities of both private sector and civil society. What is the assumption earlier? Earlier, traditional state was assumed to be omnipotent state. Earlier, traditional state assumed to be omnipotent state. Traditional state assumed to be omnipotent state. Omnipotent means, obviously what do you mean by omnipotent state? Capable of doing anything. That's what you call it as omnipotent, infinite capacity. That is infinite capacity to do anything. Earlier state was assumed to be an omnipotent state, that is infinite capacity to do anything. Now what is the assumption? Now, at present, now state is no longer the only provider of services. That means it's not like only you should provide everything to citizens. State is no longer the only provider of services. It is no longer the only provider of services. What do they call it as now? It is called as management of public affairs. Means you don't have to do everything, get the things done. Now that means good governance, network governance is called as management of public affairs. That's the key term, put it in single word noted. Management of public affairs. Fine. What are the keywords associated with network governance? Network governance includes first one, third party government. Third party government, co-owned government, means not just government, private sector, everybody will be involved. Co-owned government. Joined up government, joined up means center, state, local bodies all working together. Third party government or co-owned government, joined up government. Joined up government. So everybody working together is what you call it as the network governance concept here. What is the advantage? Advantages of network governance, or in general governance when you say advantages. Obviously you think from multiple perspective you can generate. Point number one, state can focus on only its core activities. State can focus on core activities. So non-core you give it to private sector, everybody. State can focus on core activities. Two, to strength of private sector,
in terms of strength of private sector in terms of finance, technology, strength of the private sector in terms of finance, technology, professionalism can be used, because they have that strength. Their technology, finances, professionalism can be used. That is strength of private sector. Then strength of civil society. What is the strength of civil society? Strength of civil society in terms of its voluntary action and legitimacy can be used. Strength of civil society in terms of voluntary action, that means it is able to go to the remote corners, work on its own. In terms of its voluntary action and legitimacy can be used. And legitimacy can be used. Fine, then what is the advantage? Another advantage of network governance: experimentations can be conducted. Experimentations can be done to identify new ways of doing things. Experimentations can be done to identify new ways of doing things. New ways of doing things. Fine. Overall, who will get benefited? Citizens will get benefited. Citizens will get benefited with better service delivery. Citizens get benefited through better services. Fine. Now, where you have written about the private sector, efficiency, what do you call this, finances, technology, all those things, example, just right there, PPP, outsourcing, contracts, etc. Where you have written private sector will get benefited because of so and so, right there, just now you wrote just 2-3 points above. The private sectors, finance, technology, all those things you write there, example, PPP, outsourcing, contract, user fee. So you are making the best use of it. PPP, user fee, contracts, etc. Fine. Obviously, India's where you have done civil society, you can write example, NGOs role in vaccination programs, drug de-addictions, NGOs role in vaccination programs, drug de-addiction, etc. Fine, making the best use of it. Like the many are there that of course when you write civil society separately you will understand that. That is network governance, strengths and all those things. Now make 2 columns. Fine. Where can you, what do you call as this? Situations under which, on one side, situations under which private sector and civil society can have greater role. Situations under which private sector, civil society can have greater role. So under which circumstances private sector and civil society can have greater role. On other hand, state, greater role for state. Where should you provide greater role for state? So where is the greater role for private sector and civil society? Where is the greater role for whom? State. Fine. Under private sector and civil society you write need for flexibility. When you want flexible way of doing things, then you go for private sector and civil society. Need for flexibility. Below there itself you write need for experimentation. When you want to try something new, need for experimentation. Goals are clear. Goals are clear. Need to reach remote areas. So if you want to go to the last areas, somewhere in Bastar some region, somewhere in Mizoram some region, need to reach the remote areas. Then need for diversity, then focus on cost benefit analysis, means you want to spend more but achieve better result, need for cost benefit analysis or focus on cost benefit analysis, then you should focus on this thing. Now reverse, all same line, all under whatever you wrote now, all under which you have to write. When you want to provide greater role for private sector and civil society, completely reverse it. Civil society, like for example, Ramakrishna Mission somewhere working in what do you call as this Baba Amte kind of people, giving some leprosy kind of help for leprosy students in some forest of Maharashtra. All the state can also work, but when you want to go to the last ones, civil society will help you. Now where will state play greater role then? Reverse it. So here you have written flexibility, there rigidity, yes, stability and rigidity. So where you want to be stable, you go there, state. Next to what you have written? Yeah, then no need of less scope for experiment. That means there is no need to experiment or anything. Then state should play greater role. Then goals are not clear. Where you have done, third one is goals only, right? Goals are not clear. When goal is not clear, you can't rely on private sector because you never know, it can get misused any which way. Then what is the fourth point? Reach remote areas. Then here obviously what do you call as this, less scope or less need to reach remote areas, less need to reach remote areas. Then uniformity, when it is uniform standardized approach, government should play greater role, uniformity. Then cost benefit, here it is what do you call as this, long term goal, here it is short term goal, long term goal. Then you should go for what do you call as this greater role for state. Now the point is it so easy? Because this itself is where they are asking, whatever you are writing now, these are the points which will help you to write any question on governance. Clarify that. Ensuring network governance is not so easy. That means it has challenges. Ensuring network governance is not easy. It is not very easy. Why is it not very easy? Point number one, for a long time, traditional Weberian state has functioned in. For a long time, traditional Weberian state has functioned based on hierarchy and control. For a long time, traditional Weberian state has functioned based on hierarchy and control. Hierarchy and control. Now obviously what? It cannot be modified so easily, because now you can't use hierarchy and control here. It cannot be changed easily. It cannot be changed easily. Find point number two. For a long time, vertical control and communication is followed. Vertical means what? Superior will tell, you have to listen. Vertical control and communication is followed. Now obviously private sector is not working under you. Now what we need? Network governance need horizontal and lateral communication and control. Network governance needs horizontal, lateral communication and control. Again, it's not so easy. Horizontal, lateral communication and control. Then network governance takes away the greater role of politicians and bureaucrats. Hence they will obviously resist. Network governance takes away greater role of politicians and bureaucrats, because now obviously more and more role for private sector and civil society. Takes away the greater role of politicians and bureaucrats. Obviously what they will do? They will resist it. They will resist it. Fine. Then need for new
need for new ways of regulating private sector and civil society. Need for new ways, new rules to control, to regulate private sector and civil society, or else misuses will be more. Or else misuses will be more. Need to ensure that citizenship, accountability, participation concepts are not diluted. Need to ensure, that means we need to ensure that citizenship, accountability, participation concepts are not diluted. Citizenship, accountability and participation concepts are not diluted. Fine. So these are all the challenges what you say of when you say governance as a concept or network governance as a concept. See, that's what is your even see when they use the word hollow state is also referring to what word? Small state. So they may use different words, it means the same. Third party government they tell, co-owned government they tell, again it means the same. Shared government they use the term. See, all of them mean the same. When you say, if you have, again write it in margin, all these words. When you say hollow state, it means small state. So then third party government, co-owned government, shared government all mean the same. Joined up means what? Center, state, local bodies working together is joined up government. But third party, co-owned, shared means what? State, means government, private sector, civil society working together. That is all the same. Third party or co-owned or shared up. Joint means center, state, local. Got it? These three means government, private, civil society working together. So hollow means a small state. So keep that in mind. So they may use any different words, and as I said, even if they use, because normally UPSC is not using the word network governance, they will only use the word what? Governance. So it means network governance. Unless they specifically tell you look at the word, you will understand. Because sometimes they use the word governance also for good governance. So look at the question, you will understand. If they are talking about aid conditions, something like that, okay, that means they are referring to good governance. If they are talking about working together, that means they are referring to network governance. In general, they are not referring, that means it is general governance. It's a very broad general concept. So what are they specifically referring to, you should see. Clear? Yeah, that is a way, obviously we have covered multiple topics there, network governance, this, that, everything we have tried to cover. That completes your chapter 1. I have tried to cover the content of this itself, what do you call us, these questions itself in your content. Now what you can do is, because we have already discussed, short test 1. If you can recall, we have already conducted 5 tests, and that in short test 1, I have discussed the questions on chapter 1. What you do is, once you go through it today, fine, so that what will happen, you will get a fair idea about how, then any additional questions, some another 5-6 questions, because I have already done 10 questions. Another 5-6 questions, whatever is left out in that paper 1, short test 1, that I will do tomorrow. Then we will start with your chapter 2. That is your, again, another obviously very big chapter, thinkers. So if you do some 5-6 chapters itself, that itself will take some 7-8 days. Then rest all will become easy. Obviously we know that. So because that's what is your first 5 short tests, if you do correctly, more or less core we will do it. Then we will go to the small chapters, because entire paper 2 is more or less very small chapters. Whatever we took for time for paper chapter 1, in paper 2 we can finish 2 to 3 chapters very easily, which is obvious, because all the basic will already be done. Fine. Yeah, please go through the discussion video of short test 1. It's already uploaded in the portal, so that it becomes easy. Only the rest of the questions we'll do it tomorrow, because I have told you even there itself, I have told the even clear structure. I have told how to introduce, how to write the subheading, how to generate the points, what if it is category A, category B, all those things I have discussed there. Yeah, additional questions we'll do it.